Good morning. I am Danelle Probst, NAMLE's Interim Executive Director, and I am thrilled to officially finally welcome you to NAMLE's 2025 conference. Whether this is your first conference or your 10th, there's something powerful about gathering in spaces, virtually or in person, with people who believe, as you do, that media literacy is not optional, that it is urgent, essential, and deeply human work. This year, we come together at a time of uncertainty, politically, professionally, and personally. Some of you have felt the consequences of that firsthand. You've lost funding, you've had grants canceled, or programs abruptly paused. You might have research that is now left incomplete or a job that disappeared without warning. Some of our colleagues and longtime champions of this field are not here with us this weekend because they're navigating the fallout of decisions made far from their classrooms, workplaces, and communities. Meanwhile, amid cuts and cancellations to this work, the very forces we've long warned against, media manipulation, disinformation, and polarization, are accelerating. And we know that despite years of progress, there is unlikely to be a cohesive national agenda for media literacy education in the years ahead. It's a hard truth, but it's not the end of the story. Because what we do have, what no administration can dismantle, is this community, a community of educators, librarians, researchers, journalists, youth leaders, and advocates who continue to show up, who continue to create for the field, to teach our youth, to question the systems, to guide their communities. And when the policy and budget landscapes narrow, we will widen the path by coming together. This weekend is about that path. It's about building forward with over 50 breakout sessions, 4 keynotes, and more K-12 focused content than ever before. It's about practical tools, fresh ideas, but it's also about solidarity. It's about knowing that none of us is doing this work alone, because NAMLE's strength is in our community, our partnerships, and our collaborations. For this reason, I want to thank all of our members, our organizational partners, our National Media Literacy Alliance members, our board of directors who work throughout the year to support NAMLE, and of course, Michelle Chula-Lipkin, who spent 12 and a half years as NAMLE's executive director, championing media literacy and ushering it into the national conversation. Last but not least, this conference is the result of months of hard work, long hours, and unwavering commitment from an extraordinary group of individuals. To the NAMLE staff and conference team, Kayla, Justine, Carson, Jenna, Dan, Mallory, Bill, and Liz, thank you. Your creativity, dedication, and belief in this community and their work have shaped every detail of this conference. As attendees, you'll be able to identify the conference team members throughout the weekend with their NAMLE 2025 t-shirts. They are here to support you, answer questions, and most of all, give you anything you need to make this a successful event. And beyond logistics, I hope you'll take a moment to connect with them. Their passion for this work runs deep, and you feel that in every part of this event. As you move through your weekend, there are several ways to connect with our amazing team and find information about the conference. We recommend that you download the NAMLE program. It's pinned in your lobby chat. Chat with the conference staff in the lobby, follow the conference on social media using the hashtag NAMLE25. And if you have questions, you can always email us at conference@namle.org. So let's begin this weekend with open notebooks, open minds, open hearts. Let's honor the people who can't be here by doubling down on what brought us here in the first place, a belief that everyone deserves to understand the world around them and to learn and practice the skills that empower them to shape it. And now it is my pleasure to introduce this year's conference co-chairs, Bill Selleck and Elizabeth Ortiz. Thank you both for your commitment and passion to this work.
Hello, and welcome to the 2025 NAMLE Conference. We're so excited to be here. As Donnell shared, we imagine you're here because, like us, you believe media shapes our interactions with and understanding of the world, but also because you understand the power of coming together as a community unified by a mission. That's why this year, our keynote sessions focus on connection, both in how vital it is for quality education, but also how education can catalyze it.
That's right, Bill. Community and connection are our driving focus this year. This morning, we'll hear from 1 Minute Academy and how the work of spreading video literacy and journalism skills connects our young people to their communities and how their work is responding to the AI revolution and a very shifting global education landscape. This evening, join us for a panel that will discuss how our approach to connecting students to digital competency skills is changing the face of AI. On Saturday, you'll hear from podcast producers on the power of human connection in the face of conspiracies. And to wrap up the conference, we'll hear how young writers are funneling their writing toward civic engagement.
So exciting. In addition to learning from our speakers, we hope you'll use the conference as a platform for dialogue and growth with each other. Together, we can fully equip our learners for the world to come, supporting a new generation ready to navigate the digital age. Welcome to this collaborative endeavor. Let's shape the future of media literacy together.
Can't believe it's finally here. It is
I
now
know.
our pleasure to introduce our first keynote session, From 1 Minute to Lasting Impact, Reimagining Media Literacy for the AI Generation. In a time of global instability and rapidly shifting educational priorities, video literacy has become an essential tool, not only for expression, but for survival in our media-saturated world. The 1 Minute Academy, OMA, offers a bold reimagining of how we teach storytelling, fast, accessible, and deeply personal. With more than a decade of work across more than 85 U.S. embassies, Christoph Geiseler has trained thousands of students around the world through OMA to create powerful 1-minute videos that explore identity, culture, and connection.
And this keynote explores how LMA is evolving its mission in response to the AI revolution and a shifting global education landscape. Stay tuned. It'll introduce the groundwork for a long-term impact study, reflect on lessons learned from working in over 50 countries, and offer a vision for how localized, community-based media programs can thrive. Most importantly, this session will demonstrate how youth-led storytelling, guided by a simple, elegant methodology, can help us reclaim authenticity in a time of automation. Now, please join me in welcoming Christoph Geiseler, filmmaker, educator, and founder of the 1 Minute Academy, to the stage. Christoph, hello.
Each and every one of us is on a journey to find the perfect ride, the perfect sunrise, the perfect memory. And these memories are the seeds of our stories. After I venture out into the world and slay my dragons, so to speak, I like to come home for something. I love coming back to my virtual studio, where I can host classes for anyone, anywhere in the world. I can't imagine a better way of starting my day. Hi, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Christoph Geiseler, and thank you to NAMLE for the invitation to come join you. I run an organization called the 1 Minute Academy, and for me, this is a big honor to share some of the insights into what I believe is media literacy and the future of storytelling for an AI generation. That video we just saw as an intro, I did not get off a motorcycle, even though I'm wearing the same wardrobe. I am in a tiny little studio with a 3-point lighting system. And this is all kind of part of the interaction design and the setup to get people excited about video and storytelling. And back to the theme of what this is about, this concept of from 1 minute to lasting impact. The question is, how can we tell our stories quickly and think more specifically about the future of media literacy in our lives within educational systems and as a form of countering a lot of the disinformation that's out there, which I think are some of these big meta themes that we're all here for. And I see that we have folks here from Brazil, from Arizona. Thanks, Kayla and Donnell, for setting this all up. So I'm just going to start right away with Mallory asks, is the surfing video AI generated? Definitely not. I'm going to be sharing some of the themes around storytelling that I personally believe in, almost like philosophical pillars, and where to kind of draw that line between when do you start using AI and when not. And also that big house that I was riding up to is not my house. That was an Airbnb during the pandemic. But I'm just going to quickly start with showing a video made by one of the students of a recent program that we hosted in Morocco. And I'll kind of use this video as a reference point as I just explain a little bit more of the work that we've done and how it relates to this conference.
There was a time when I built walls around myself, thinking the world was something I didn't need to share. But as time passed, I began to feel something was missing. But life has a way of changing things. Then I met people who showed me the beauty of sharing, of being together. Their laughter filled the emptiness I didn't even realize was there. Friendship is not just company. It's the light in the darkness, the warmth when everything feels cold, and the joy that turns ordinary moments into unforgettable memories. I once thought I didn't need anyone, but now I know good friends are everything.
So the video that we just watched was exactly a minute long. And the big question is, when we watch a video like that, we have to ask ourselves, is it authentic? Is it real? What does it mean to us when suddenly somebody is touching our heartstrings? How can we teach students to tell stories like this so that it doesn't feel like it was generated by an engine or a robot, so to speak? And that brings up basically the big theme of this presentation, which is the teacher's dilemma. What, why, and how do we teach? The reason why I ask these three questions is because AI, kind of the elephant in the room, is shaking the fundamentals of what education means, but also more specifically, it's shaking what media literacy means, because it's almost like the storytelling tools are moving faster and developing faster than we are even aware of. And so then the problems and the opportunities and the limitations that come with that might already be there, but we haven't even talked about them, we haven't researched them, and we have to somehow dig into our own intuition to ask what is right, what works, what doesn't. So it feels a little bit like the Wild West, a frontier, and I'd like to share the teaching approach that I've taken for the last 10 years, almost anticipating some of these tools, but also really focusing in on what works and just sticking to that. So I'm going to quickly show a video about the work that I do around the 1 Minute Academy. It helps put it into context, and you'll see again, this video is exactly a minute long. Pick up your smartphone for a moment, hold it, look at it. The question is, how do we use our cameras like professionals and spread this knowledge to people who need it most? I'd like to invite you to become a 1 Minute ambassador. We've tested our workshops with 85 different US embassies and institutional partners like National Geographic, Adobe, and Princeton University. We teach people about camera moves, story structure, lighting, interviews, video editing, and AI text generation. Our courses are more than just making videos. After our training program, ambassadors can replicate what they've learned anywhere in the world. It's all about the power of light, the power of voice, and the power of you. Let's build a better future. we can make an impact together. So the first big question to ask is, well, what is a 1-minute video and why do we teach this? A 1-minute video is minimum 1 minute and maximum 1 minute. So I've spent the last 15 years, you could say, obsessed with this restraint of how do you fit things into exactly 60 seconds as a design methodology, but also as a limited playing field. So we weren't trying to teach people to make documentaries. We weren't trying to teach people to make selfie videos for Instagram or TikTok. It was really, how do we teach people to literally stick within the constraints of a 60-second format? And what are some of the things we learned in that process? The first big underlying question we had was, well, why do we teach video production? The first main pillar is this idea of video literacy. Video literacy fits within media literacy as kind of a column or a pillar. And we can think of video literacy just the way we think of music literacy or language literacy. It's essentially this idea that we learn to read and write in school, we learn to speak languages, we learn to play instruments. But at what point do we have to assume that video literacy, and specifically making videos, is a fundamental pillar of our communication skill set? And when should it be taught in schools? So we can think of video literacy as the ability to film and edit a video with a beginning, middle, and end as a basic skill set. Because after video literacy, there comes a very profound emotional transformation, which is called creative confidence. This is where we've given somebody the tool to tell their own story, and they then feel like they can do something. They can be artistic, they can be poetic. And that kind of goes beyond just the simple form of literacy. The next level after that is this idea of empowerment. At what point do people feel so confident and creative that they're able to tell a story that changes other people's behavior or can have a positive impact on the society around them? So when we were looking at this idea of, well, how do we teach people to make 1-minute videos, is how do we analyze those different layers of emotional development? First, there's the skills, then there is the emotional transformation of creativity, but then there's the social aspect. And if you look at those three ideas, it sort of brings up this bigger question of, well, what is literacy in the modern era now that we have AI? So a base definition for literacy is the ability to read and write. This can be in any medium. And when we think of media literacy, it's this idea to, or this ability to critically analyze stories presented in the mass media and to determine their accuracy or credibility. So I think right now, this question of mass media is also being called into question, because mass media, it's what McLuhan references, the message is the medium. Does mass media include WhatsApp? Does it include group conversations? Does it include voice notes? Does it include what's on TV, in video gaming consoles? It's almost the ecosystem for screens and media is so large now and is being completely changed as we speak. First, we might have to think of, well, what does mass media mean? And is the definition of media literacy even appropriate for the new time? So that's one first question I'll introduce. I'll talk a little bit about my background, and the question is, well, why am I asking these questions? And who am I specifically? So I consider myself a photographer, deep down. 25 years ago, I was taking the same kind of photos that I'm taking now. I started with black and white, and now, just like many people, I've moved over to digital. When I went to university, I got accepted at Princeton, and I remember very early on, I had this idea of becoming a photographer or a musician. And I remember when I told my father the news, I said, look, I got into Princeton, I want to be an artist. And he basically made the comment, he said, well, if you're going to a serious university, you have to study something serious. And I guess in his mind, photography didn't cut it. And he also said, if you want to study any of the arts, such as photography, you should go to a conservatory or an art school. And so then what I decided to do was, okay, well, I guess I'll study something serious. I'll study politics. And in studying politics, I learned one very important thing is that I want to have nothing to do with politics. I solidified my commitment to the idea of photography and the arts for expressing myself. So what I did, and I see here, Corin is a fellow photographer. Great to meet you. So I wrote a thesis about using music improvisation as a community building tool. And that allowed me to continue doing work in the arts, apply some of the democratic and social development theories I was studying. And because I was so shy to actually play music with other people, I hid behind the camera. And I started teaching myself how to make videos as grant reports. And this was from about 2005 until about 2010. This is when we started to make DVDs. This was before YouTube became a thing. This was before Facebook allowed the sharing of videos. And I noticed that funders and institutions didn't want to watch these 10 or 20-minute documentaries. So I started making the videos shorter and shorter and shorter until they became a minute long. And as soon as they became a minute long, that's when the embassies said, could you train our diplomats how to make 1-minute videos? So this was around 2010. And over the last 15 years, I've had the privilege, this is what I would call it, to basically work with the US Department of State to train emerging voices. This is a category they use, diplomats, which are working in the field, and opinion leaders, how to make 1-minute stories about their life, about their business, how to promote mutual understanding between the United States and these other countries, using video as a communication tool, as a social development tool. And a lot of what it was how do we basically use a train the trainers model to teach people to replicate the methodology so that it doesn't cost the embassies anything else, it doesn't cost us anything. And it really is this idea of, planting seeds. And did it work or not? In the process of doing this over the last 15 years, after the State Department came knocking on the door, then National Geographic said, hey, we heard you make these 1-minute films. Could you teach our photographers and our videographers to do the same? Because we want to get to the point. Can you make instructional videos for us? And then Adobe said, could you help train our strategic communications and marketing teams how to make 1-minute stories using their own software? So what was interesting about this was, in pursuit of sticking with the exact same framework of just a 1-minute story, I discovered that all these major institutions were having the same growing pains. As the internet was moving towards everything being short and snappy, there was this demand for telling stories. And so that's why over the last 12 years, we did work in about 60 countries. We hosted hundreds of workshops, including Princeton, National Geographic, Adobe, the US Department of State, the Kennedy Center. And throughout this process, we kept on refining the model. Okay, how do we make this better? So what I'm going to share right now is basically the root formula that we teach in our workshops of how a 1-minute video is structured. We always start with the music. One of the traps that people have when they edit videos is they always start with the imagery first. We found that in teaching people to use music first, it sets the heartbeat or a pulse, and this allows them to almost have a metronome for what comes next, which is a narrative or an interview. Anything that's between 100 and 150 words fits comfortably into a minute. So this idea of using word count as a metric for an instructional pedagogy made it very easy to basically give students a limitation that, okay, write a narrative that's 150 words long, as opposed to just sending them off with a camera to do something. It's then very easy to teach video literacy and video production because we basically say, okay, match the video footage to the actual voiceover or the narrative that's being spoken. That's called B-roll. And then the structure of the video, it starts with a challenge, next comes a solution, and then a call to action. And so that we found that by giving this formula very early on to students, along with this limitation, it helped them quickly wrap their heads around something that would otherwise be very complicated. Because when you think about video production, there's several different phases. There's the pre-production phase, the production phase, and the post-production phase. And we kind of use this story arc of the way the production works, if you think of it as almost a beginning, middle, and end, to then map out a curriculum. So the curriculum, we divided up this idea that pre-production is everything that happens before you start recording. Production is everything that happens during a recording, and post-production is everything that happens after a recording. You'll notice that the instructional videos we use to describe and explain these themes are all exactly a minute long. So suddenly, the medium became the message as well. So this meant that while we were trying to tell students that, look, it's important to just adopt this limitation, they saw it in action every single time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share one of those instructional videos that we use to teach people how to use the editing software. We basically stuck to using Adobe Premiere Pro exclusively over the last 15 years because we found it worked on Mac and PC, and it came with a 7-day free trial. So this allowed us to distribute to students to anyone in the world without violating IP or copyright laws of software usage. So here's a quick video of one of the lessons from the handbook, from the learning platform, from the online lessons. So you can sort of see how that 1 minute fits into the structure and the process.
Video editing works just like audio editing. We grab a video from our bins and drop it into the timeline, and use the same arrow and razor blade tool to trim, slice, and delete our clips. If we go to the effects box, we can open video transitions and find a dissolve called film dissolve. We drop it onto the left or right of a clip, and it gives us that smooth fade in, fade out of a video like we often see in movies. If we stack two videos on top of each other and add a film dissolve to the uppermost one, the two will fade into each other. We can add title cards to our video timeline by going to File, New, Title. The T for Text button allows us to add words to our staging area, while the Center Align button straightens our text. Close the window, drag our new title from the projects box into the video timeline. Add film dissolve like other clips.
Did you all notice how that video is exactly 60 seconds long? You can almost think of it like a teaser for the lesson material. In terms of the teacher experience, by showing these 1 minute instructional videos every 10 or 15 minutes, it allows the teacher to take a break. And it also allows me to kind of hide behind the B-roll, so to speak. Like I just did right now. For about a minute, I can take a sip of water. I can, reorient myself. In terms of teaching the material, we would distribute handbooks to the students. And you'll notice here in the handbook that there's blank spaces for all the key words and terminology. We discovered over the years of teaching that when we just gave a blank handbook to all the students, the women would be very diligent about writing notes, but the men would never take any notes. And they would end up just looking at their female peers, which is funny about the way some of these gender habits work internationally. So what we decided as a solution was, well, let's give students 80% of those scripts, but they then actively have to fill in the words, almost like Mad Libs. And what we found is that by using this methodology, we could then also teach in any country using simultaneous translation. In this case, on the right side, you see the French handbook, but we taught in Burmese, we taught in Russian, in Arabic. And what this allowed me to do as a teacher was basically refer to the handbook and the terms in real time and have a simultaneous translator or a live translator reference the handbook as well to save them some of the brain gymnastics of real-time translations. And we would then ask students in the live setting, either online, like this in Zoom, or in the classroom, to basically shout out the answers. And the reason for this, and this kind of is part of this importance of language, is teaching students the vocabulary so that they can communicate with each other using professional terms. But then as an instructor, you can reference professional themes in giving them feedback. So it accelerates the learning curve. And I know I'm speaking fast and I'm saying a lot, but I figure there's just so much to share in the short amount of time span. In that instructional video, which we just showed, you'll notice we placed the instructional video inside the software so that the actor, he was basically pointing to places in the software where the student needed to do the next command. And we would also use the title cards above the instructional video within the software. You can sort of see where it's highlighted in yellow. Those were the blanks that the students had to fill in. So this basically allowed the students to go in afterwards, watch the instructional videos, pause them, and fill in the handbooks. So you can sort of see everything is designed in the spirit of giving them lots of information quickly, packing it all in, but also making it very easy. Because as technology changes, people lose some willpower in sort of teaching themselves. So we're really trying to get them as far along the learning process as possible. Some of you are maybe looking at the lighting setup. So when we would teach on Zoom, I would use a 3-point lighting system and always on this gray background. So this basically allowed me to neutralize my background and create this very consistent look, which means I can essentially be anywhere. I'm using a program called Wirecast. So you can sort of see here on the left is what my view is. And I'm basically sending a signal to Zoom. And so you see here on the left side, I basically can take pre-recorded videos and ship them over to Zoom, which is essentially what you're seeing. I also am using what's called an ATEM mini switcher, which basically allows me to switch between channels. And so this adds a little bit of magic in sort of the live broadcasting setup. This is a quick overview of my setup here. I have a PowerPoint presentation, a computer with Zoom pins, 2 live cameras, and those are all being routed into an ATEM switcher. I use pre-recorded videos and send it to OBS, which is a free version it's called Open Broadcasting Software, and then Wirecast, which is a paid version. And I can send that to Zoom or Restream if I wanted to, do a live broadcast. This is, again, part of the lesson in the production design. In order to teach these technological skills to large groups of students, we had alumni of our programs become first train the trainers. And here you can see 2 of our teachers, Abel from Laos and Suad from Jordan. We had them adhere to our style guide and brand guide. So this gave them a little bit more gravitas and it allowed me as a teacher, when I'm in a Zoom session and I see all the students, I can quickly see where the teachers are because they have their branded title cards. And in order to deliver our instructional content, we never put anything on YouTube because we felt that that would devalue and dilute the value of what we were offering. So we built a learning management system, which basically is a pipeline for sharing our videos. And you might notice this one is in Portuguese. We had video view, slide view, and text view on all the content. So basically, we're making it easy for people to interact with the videos. We also had a simple resources page. We discovered that in teaching people video production skills, that all the online learning platforms were so focused on surveys and live chat and quizzes and tests, it made the process of teaching cumbersome for us as teachers. So we felt the easiest was just almost in a Netflix way, is just give everybody all the content and all the resources and let them a la carte or buffet style kind of pick through everything as they needed it. But then they could come to the live sessions to get more of a deep dive. I think Kayla, how am I doing on time? Because I'm just, feeding all this content. I have a couple more slides to give. This gets a little bit meta. We developed a creativity engine because we discovered that when people brainstorm in terms of storytelling, they create list hierarchies. So the way we're trained to read and write from the top to the bottom of a page, we have a subconscious bias towards information that's at the top of a page. And we observed that when students were trying to figure out what to make stories about, they would get trapped by this very generic brainstorming process of just making outlines on a sheet of paper. So what we tried to do was show them how to use geometric shapes using and placing their words and their ideas around circles and triangles and squares. And we found that this kind of helped speed up the brainstorming process. About 10 years ago, we created a little Mad Libs type app for this. And now with the onset of AI and ChatGPT, we're able to teach students to literally take the synopsis they get from our little engine, put it into ChatGPT, and this allows students to then storyboard and get narratives very quickly. So this is one way we've tried to integrate into the world of AI and chatbots. The last step of our teaching methodology is to provide everybody with certification. In developing countries, a lot of students, for them to have a certificate is a sign of success. They give it to their grandmothers, they use it to apply for jobs. And we found that this increases student retention rates. At the end of every program, we would try to measure the creative confidence of students. So we would give them the exact same survey at the beginning and the end in sort of these teaching metrics that we developed around doing interviews, 3-point lighting, editing on Premiere. And by using this stat of, okay, what was your creative confidence before and after a course, we were able to sort of demonstrate to sponsors, okay, there is learning improvement. And this allowed us to create this pipeline and this business model for working with bigger institutions. I guess there's a couple thoughts that I have to wrap up before I bring in one of our trainers. So she can speak about her own experience. This big question is, well, why do we do this work? It's an opportunity and also a responsibility. This is kind of a big moment here of where do we as trainers and teachers and adults try to pass on and give the next generation a storytelling ability. And when we think about that original teacher's dilemma that I talked about of what, why, and how do we teach, maybe we need to kind of flip it on its head and think about, well, what, why, and how is not a linear process anymore. And actually, the teacher and the student are on a non-hierarchical plane. This theory is called constructivism. Piaget and Freire, they talked about this in the theater of the oppressed. It's almost like, how can we learn from our own students, and how can we give them a space to show us how to be creative? And essentially that's what AI is doing, is democratizing power in a lot of these learning hierarchies. And it all boils down to the importance of language. Like, which words are we using? What vocabulary are we teaching? How can we teach students to use professional terminology to get the most out of their tools? And with that, I would love to just invite one of my colleagues, Suad Agad from Jordan, to join me on the stage here, because she started as a student of mine, then she became a co-trainer. She's done research on the impact of what we were doing with the 1 Minute Academy. And Suad, maybe you can now be my teacher and maybe share with the group what you think the biggest takeaway is from your learning journey, and what advice would you give to myself and then other trainers in the room about the future of video literacy, media literacy, and what you think is important for community development. So, Suad, I'll let you speak for a couple minutes.
Thank you, Christoph. Hello, everyone. As Christoph mentioned, I first joined 1 Minute Academy in one of the workshops a few years ago in Jordan. And since then, I've been working with Christoph to help teach students from around the world how to create videos and how to tell their own stories. So it started with me learning how to express myself through video, and then I got to help others do the same. And that was really powerful, because it also inspired my studies and research focus. So with 1 Minute Academy's support, I did a small study with schools in Lebanon to just explore how video literacy education can be used in schools, and how we can bring storytelling and self-expression into classrooms from a young age. We looked at how video production education can be integrated, what works, what doesn't work, and we introduced 1 Minute Academy framework and talked to both students and teachers before and after the workshop. And the findings were clear, actually. Students learn better when they are doing something hands-on. They were more engaged and more confident when they were making videos about topics they really care about. But also, to make this kind of learning work, and we noticed that teachers need training, of course, and support. They need access to technology and resources. As a learner and as a teacher, and now with the AI, I believe that tools will keep changing, but storytelling and the human voice and authentic stories will always be at the heart of media literacy. What I really think teachers need to do today is they need to give students time to create, to reflect, and to speak about topics they really care about, and to express themselves in creative ways, such as videos. And with everything is going on with AI and the fast digital content, we need to guide them to use media with intention, and to ask themselves, is this information true? Did AI make this up, or how do I check? Because this builds actually digital literacy and protects them from blindly just trusting AI.
Thanks, Suad. Yeah, it's always a pleasure being able to teach with you and the insights you give. And I think, just to build on what Suad said, I think we, in a minute or two, we can do some Q&A. Just to wrap up, Suad, you mentioned this idea of the tools we use. And there's one quote from Thoreau in Walden, which is, I think, one of my personal favorites. He says, "Don't become the tool of our tools." So we have to think of AI as a tool. If anything, it's just speeding up the creation process. And if we're not careful, it will take our agency away because we let it. And at the end of the process, we can work hand in hand with the AI to work better, smarter, faster. And I think this is kind of the big future and the big opportunity we have, is because media literacy, it doesn't need to be restrained to this idea of identifying misinformation or disinformation or speaking about the mass media in academic terms. It's this idea of media literacy is really, how do we engage with this liquid display and this reflection of our consciousness that's being encapsulated by ones and zeros? Again, it takes it to a very meta level, but I think media literacy now, you could almost say, it's not per se a renaissance, it's more of just finally it has its opportunity to be relevant because everything is media. And so I would just end on that note, is that as humans, we should not forget that we have agency and we shouldn't give that up to our tools. Just like I've been able to work with one of my former students and consider Suad a colleague, I would encourage everyone, when you're in the classroom or elsewhere, to sort of look for the signals and try to learn from the bottom up, because that's where the fastest and the most powerful messages come from, especially at a grassroots level. If you're interested in learning more about what we do, here's my email. It's Christoph at oneminuteacademy.com. We don't use any social media per se. We do have some handles here. If any of you want free access to our, let's see, if you want access to our online learning platform, if you go to oneminuteacademy.com, in the top right corner, there's a button that says login. If you literally just type in NAMLE1, that's the token, and that should give you free access to our instructional videos. And I hope that in the future, we can work more closely with NAMLE. And Danelle, I see now you're here. Perhaps we can just bring this more into the Q&A of how this is linked to your work. Are there any themes which you think are relevant for the rest of your conference? What's next? That's the big question.
Yeah, Christoph, this was amazing. And I don't know if you've been keeping track of the chat, but I'm seeing so many light bulbs from people as you're talking about reframing how we're thinking about this in the classroom and with our students. And I think one of the big reasons that, one of the things we originally talked about with this keynote was just this idea of the fact that things are changing so rapidly, and how are we pivoting and using this as an opportunity to really rethink how we can bring media literacy when we're facing challenges from, all sorts of external forces. So I think this has given people so much to think about. And there's also 1,000 questions that
Awesome.
people are really wanting to know a lot of things. So I'm just going to start, and there's so many, so I'm just going to start asking, and hopefully we can get through them all. But a couple of questions from Catherine. She said, how long is each course?
Great question. So to put it in context, we've literally been using the exact same curriculum and methodology for the last 10 years. And every single course is a fine-tuning of the previous course. And so what we've discovered is when we host in-person workshops, we do a boot camp format, which is 2 days, 6 hours on each day, usually on a weekend, so that on the first day, we're doing pre-production and production. at the end of the first day, we're getting everyone to download the software. And then on the second day, we're teaching editing and post-production. We try to delay the software downloading as long as possible because that just becomes such a can of worms and a distraction. We kind of split it up that way. We discovered online, like in a Zoom format, we do 5-day workshops, 2 hours on each day. And we've discovered that the video quality and the content produced is actually better in the 5-day format because everyone can do small homework assignments between sessions. So you could technically envision, 5 workshops over 5 days, or maybe 5 workshops over 4 weeks, once a week, ending with an in-person peer review. And so the idea is that at the end of every workshop, whether it's in person or virtual, there is some sort of a breakout process so students can review each other's work. And that takes cues from just art schools and architecture schools, because at the end of the day, students need to get some feedback from their peers to be able to take ownership of what they've done. And that's a way for the teacher to kind of remove himself or herself from the equation. So I hope that helped.
Yes, and I know, so one of the things we first spoke about was in kind of this framing of an opportunity is that your program was impacted by some of the funding cuts that were made. And so you were back in the US and really thinking about what was next. So are you now doing these trainings for teachers in the US, or is that something you have on your kind of long-term agenda?
Well, yeah, so I'm happy you asked this question because I think there's a lot of opportunity here. So at the end of February, a lot of the funding that we had, which was linked to the government and working abroad, it got cut and terminated. And my immediate reaction was, instead of saying, oh no, this is the end of the world, I said, okay, maybe this is a gift from the universe, and I need to start thinking differently about the way I approach things. So in a way, it was a blessing because now it's forced me to ask, how would this work in the United States? And am I even the right person to do it? I came back to LA and my first reaction was, oh, I have to reinvent myself. We've got to do things differently. It's AI. But in speaking with people who work in the film industry and in education, the consensus was from so many people that, oh, I wish I had this skill set. Oh, I wish I knew how to do this. And so I realized, and this is kind of this idea of reimagining media literacy for the AI generation, nothing actually needs to be reimagined. The education just needs to be made available. I think what it is people are so often living in a vacuum, not being able to find the right resources at the right time. This is where the opportunity is. How do you get the curriculum? How do you get the resources to people? And so, for example, if NAMLE were to say, and maybe over the next couple of days, this becomes apparent, hey, look, there's a whole school system in Dallas or in Florida or in Brazil or wherever, and we have somebody which would love to just distribute this to teachers. The cost of distribution is next to zero, but it's just more, the question is the opportunity. Who can pick up that phone call and make it happen? And so in my personal case, I don't want to be the person making those phone calls and running around like a headless chicken. It's more like, who's the right person who could just say, look, we want to spread this to more people. And that's kind of been my philosophy all along is, okay, the more people that are out there doing this in a good way, the better for everybody. And it's impossible to kind of hold on to it and pretend that you can keep it all safe. It's more like, okay, like give it out. And so that's kind of my opinion now is like, where would the partnerships be? How could NAMLE as an association or organization facilitate? I have a curriculum that's already been developed and tested, but I'm sure there's a lot of other people in this community which maybe are also looking for an opportunity to pool their resources. What would it take to create like a Signal or a WhatsApp group or a Google spreadsheet and sort of say, oh, wow, we have all these specialists in the room. How do we just pool content together and make it available for everyone so that it's sort of strength in numbers?
Yeah, and I think that speaks to what I was talking about in my opening remarks, and that, there is not going to, I don't think we anticipate that there's going to be a lot of organization from a top-down level in the United States around media literacy education. And so that really means that we have to start thinking about, like, especially us at NAMLE, how are we connecting the people? How are we connecting the resources to where they need to go? And what does that look like? Because it is different, right, across geopolitical, socioeconomic landscapes. And so it's not the same. The needs are not the same uniformly across the United States. It's very different from school district to school district, state to state. Most people who've had a conversation with me know I talk frequently about living in Missouri, and that's a very different experience than someone living in California or New York. And so how do we really kind of address these different challenges that are happening? And tools like this, I think, are part of that solution and figuring out how to more equitably distribute media literacy education.
So can I ask you a question? And I'm sure there's more questions in the chat group, but do you feel that the upheaval happening on the technological side with all these new tools being introduced at high speed, and also the educational system being reanalyzed and rewritten as we speak, do you see opportunities everywhere, or do you feel that, okay, we don't stand a chance for the technological change that's happening? How do you sort of see it as a sort of like a national or a meta view?
Yeah, I don't think you can be in education and think that education is the solution. Right. So I think, I think it's a matter of thinking, much like you're talking about, like, how do we pivot? How do we think about addressing these issues that are cropping up? And I think, it's difficult, especially I think for classroom teachers, because they are really just up against a wall. And I feel like the ground is shifting below them constantly of, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to get these test scores, and we have to teach these curriculums. And I think that's the thing that's so great about media literacy, is that it builds into everything that they're already doing. You don't have to add something. You're not, saying here's another curriculum. It's simply taking what you're already doing and building in these media literacy lessons. And so I think the biggest challenge is just keeping up with the technology and addressing students where they're at. And I think it was Corin said earlier, like the attention span issue, right? I hear that a lot from educators, that students don't have the attention span they used to. And so something like a 1-minute video in this kind of like iterative process is something that speaks to that kind of change. And so those are the types of creative approaches I think we're going to have to continue to have moving forward. Oh, I think Christoph is frozen. There you are. You're back.
As you were saying that.
You were frozen in a very lovely pose. That never happens to me.
That's funny.
But thank you, Christoph, so much. We're going to move to our closing remarks, but I so appreciate this. It was absolutely phenomenal.
Can I say one last thing? So my personal advice, so now I've been obsessing with 1-minute videos for the last 15 years. I would say, if I can give any unsolicited advice, is that when we think of our phones as tools, I think the most underutilized and undervalued tool on our phones is our microphone. We think of it as a camera, we think of it as a planning tool, a communication tool, but I believe the future of the internet is voice. And so one of the things that I'm doing now is just making audio diaries. And I think if I could advise any teacher, anyone out there, practice making audio diaries and your ability to just speak your ideas in real time, because that's where prompting is going. Soon keyboards might disappear entirely. And start thinking of, in terms of media literacy, is where does the voice fit into it and the power of the voice. So that would be my closing thought. And just a big thank you to you and your colleagues for this incredible opportunity.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.